All right, good morning, everybody. Let's get this going. All right, so I get the honor as the CMP coordinator to share with you a little bit about the CMP, the history of CMP and the conservation standards. So I'm going to start with the standards. The first version of the standards was published in 2004, and it really brought together a few different elements. One, a set of basic principles. There was also a bunch of existing processes and how-to guidance, and then there was a need for common language. And I'm going to go through each one of these, but these all kind of came together at the same time to form what became the open standards for the practice of conservation. So the basic principles, back in 2002, 2003, FOS, with funding from the Moore Foundation, did some research. We were interested in how can we get better at monitoring and evaluation? How can we get better at planning within the conservation community? But we thought that there's probably a lot to learn from other fields. So we did this study to look at systems across several different fields. You can see those up here. And out of that came a report to the Moore Foundation. It was kind of synthesized everything we had learned. And within that report, we had organized things according to steps in the project management cycle, which actually correspond pretty closely to the first version of the conservation standards. And even you can see the overlap with what we have right now. And for each of those steps, there were sub-steps and there were tasks and guidance, but you can see it was pretty basic, just single line things. It was like the skeleton. And so to put meat, or I'm a vegetarian, to put protein on the skeleton, we look to our community and the founding members of the Conservation Measures Partnership. And this is very much like, I wish we had thought to tell the stone soup story. That was great. But this was really very much a case of the different members, the founding members of the Conservation Measures Partnership, looking to each other to bring their expertise to the standards. So the Nature Conservancy, they brought stuff on setting targets, conservation targets, doing viability assessment, threat assessment, really good on those technical tools and thinking. WWF had a bunch of systems, and it's such a wide network. There were lots of different systems, but those systems themselves had a lot in common with the common principles and practices, and certainly fed into the conservation standards. Same thing with WCS. They had their Living Landscapes program, and there's a lot of overlap with what we see now in the conservation standards. And then within FOS, we were using things like conceptual models or situation models, even the start to theories of change. So those were kind of what we put into the pot. So everybody, again, kind of put in their stuff to help make the conservation standard soup. Sorry, Canadians, I'm gonna rip off of you. So the other part was the terminology. When the founding members, they were colleagues, they were representatives that just kind of came together and said, hey, we're all doing work in conservation and we're spending a lot of time, money, resources, but we're not doing a great job of learning from one another. So how can we be better at learning from one another? How can we collaborate? How can we share? And one of the first things that they realized was they didn't even speak the same language. They were all using different terms, and they couldn't, they didn't know what each other was talking about. So one of the very first things they did was lay out what they called a Rosetta Stone, but kind of crosswalking all of the terminology and the steps. And you can see here's where they came to agreement on what the CMP or the conservation standards terms should be. So these basic principles plus the how-to guidance and processes that were already in place and the common language all came together to form the basis for the first version of the conservation standards, which was in 2004, and we've since had several other versions, and each time we bring in more lessons learned. We kind of practice our own adaptive management of learning what's working, what's missing, what can we do better, and I'm really happy to see that as we've gone along, and in particular in the 2020 version, we've really reached out to the whole community and had a lot of input. I think there were 70 to 100 people involved in making some level of edits to the 2020 version of the conservation standards, so that was pretty cool. And I kind of shiver to think about this, but I'm sure we will have another version sometime in the near future. So the other thing is that the conservation standards provide a great common language framework, and it works for a lot, but it doesn't, the basic principles and practices work, but they sometimes need to be tweaked for specific organizational language or cultures or different audiences. So we see different flavors of them. WWF has its own version. The Nature Conservancy has its conservation by design. There's healthy country planning for working with indigenous communities. So there are different flavors, but the essence of it is the same. This is really cool to see where we are now. This isn't even fully updated, I don't think. And if you want to update it, help us update it, please see Ryan or me. But this is just a map showing these are all projects that have used or are using the conservation standards and or Marathi. So it's pretty cool. We have a lot of coverage around the world. Let's see. I think I might be okay. Also, we've got really cool examples of like Chile taking this, really internalizing this, bringing it into the protected area system and using the conservation standards throughout. We've got healthy country planning covering many areas of Australia. There are lots of CCNet coaches from all around the world, as we can see here. And CMP membership has continued to grow and expand and diversify. So it's really great to see the community growing. So that's a little bit about the conservation standards. I'll talk a little bit now about CMP. So CMP, I'm actually going to remember to ask this. Does anybody know, and you can't be anybody that I've talked to about this in the last month or so, anyone know what the original name of CMP was? It's really exciting. Dun, 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 dun. They were the Conservation Measures Group. CMG. I have no idea when they became CMP, but they did. And I think that's a better name for them anyway. But these were the founding members. And this is the Rosetta Stone that I mentioned, the crosswalk of terminology that they did early on, and that led to, or was an input to, the first version of the conservation standards. So CMP continued to, in 2007, it had version 2 of the standards. It also grew a bit. You can see a few new organizations added down here. And in particular, in that time frame, one of the big products that came out of that was the threats and actions classification, which IUCN was a big part of that. It was a shared threats and actions classification, and it continues to be one of the most frequently visited and downloaded products from the CMP website. And it also is, actually, I think it's on the CS website now, but it's fully integrated into IUCN systems. So that's pretty cool. So other things, we have version 3.0 come in this time frame, which incorporated some elements of human well-being. This was the first time that CMP kind of really took a step back and realized that, based on the feedback that CMP was hearing, that there wasn't really adequate attention or any really recognition of human well-being. And so there was a group that got together across CMP and CCNet, put together some guidance, an initial idea. The first one came out, I think, in 2012. Then there was another version, 2016. And we've had further work since then, work on population health environment, and also the holistic approaches to human well-being. So stuff has happened. We know there's still more work to do there, and hopefully we can continue to do that and evolve that work. In this time frame, also, there was a focus on where we've got a bunch of NGOs, but we should bring in the donor community because NGOs on their own can't change the world. Let's bring in some donors. And then there was the membership broadened a bit. We have some folks here from Latin America, as well as some other NGOs based in the US. So, and then a few members, I don't know if you caught that, but a few left CNP. And this is typical. CNP's membership has ebbed and flowed over the years. We like to see it just continuously grow, but for a variety of reasons, some members end up moving on, but we hope to bring them back. So here we are in this time frame, a focus on government agencies. So we brought in a few US-based federal and state government agencies, and I know there are some others here that we hope to bring in too, and some expansion of the membership as well. And this was also kind of toward the end of this time frame where we realized that we had some initiatives that were going on. Some were more active, some weren't, but they really could use greater support from the coordinator. And so we set up this workspace, a space for them to collaborate internally, and really started communicating more, kind of nudging them along, providing support. And we were even able, thanks to some of the generous donors within CNP, provide some seed funding to kind of also help get these initiatives going. So this is where we are with our current membership. And some things that we've been doing over the last couple of years, you know about 4.0. And with this, there was a kind of a big attempt to be focused on our look and feel, kind of keeping the solid content we've always had, but realizing that we needed a little bit of a makeover. And so we worked on our websites. We also realized we needed to move into the 21st century and get involved in social media. Some of us went kicking and screaming a bit. And also we've started sharing things on YouTube. So where might we go? I can't say, but I will say that we are doing starting Saturday and Sunday here, we're going to be working on the next version, the 2023 to at least the next 5-10-year strategic plan, practicing our own adaptive management. We also, I'm sure, will continue to maintain strong ties with CCNet and hopefully even strengthen those over time. I can imagine that we're going to want to try to see where we can scale up things so we can increase our reach and our impact around the world, and hopefully also diversify our membership so that we can have greater coverage over the world. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Will.
Super. Thank you so much, Caroline. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Well done on making it through to today. And yeah, I mean, I hope that was really helpful. You might have thought of one or two things, noticed one or two things that you didn't know. Hopefully, those of you who knew a bit of the story, it resonated with you. And those of you who didn't, hopefully that was useful. I'm just going to talk a little bit more now about what's going on right now. Some of the initiatives that CNP is actually doing. A number of you may indeed are already engaged on some of those, and that's fantastic. I think we've seen the collaboration, just the interface going between CNP, CCNet, and wider. Actually, that's become really seamless almost. I think it is really quite strong and working very well, and we intend to go forward in that way. So, what are some of the things? So, whilst the conservation standards themselves, absolutely, that's our flagship tool, that's our flagship product. But CNP is much more than being authors or stewards of the conservation standards. Other things, absolutely, as Caroline has mentioned, have happened. We've delivered, have been really important things over the years, like the standard classifications for actions and threats, like materials to support auditing. Some of you might have used that. It's a sort of a self-reflection, or can be used as more of an independent auditing tool. So some of you might have used that. It's quite useful to see both how programs and organizations are going in terms of implementing standards, and there are also adapted versions of it. CNP has also informed the development of Miradi, and then there have been other things like that really important guidance around human well-being has been really a useful development too. So a number of different things. And then more recently, there's been a more concerted effort on what we're calling our initiatives. and particularly around collaborative learning. And that's really in the spirit of what CMP has been trying to do for a long, long time, is learn collaboratively. And we're absolutely delighted to have CCNet and other organizations, whether they're members of CMP, CCNet, or other individuals, join these collaborative learning efforts if they're interested in the topic. So this, what we're calling our collaborative learning effort and these initiatives, they've been going on, we're in about the fourth year now of that, with some really generous funding support from Moore and others, so very much appreciated, because it really has helped us to accelerate some of this learning work. So a number of the initiatives you might know about or have been involved in, there are things going now on nature-based solutions or science-based targets, or things on, the human well-being, that was part of an initiative really, or lighter conservation standards, easier ways into conservation standards. You might learn more about that later if you don't know about that session. So, but as well as all that, lots of things too on the communication side, the sharing the community's work, website development, social media, all those things that Caroline was just mentioning. We have made a specific effort on that to go forward with it. And there's, I guess, what you might call the CS Promotions Initiative, which Justin Grubb from Running Wild Media has been supporting. Also sorts of new things that we've been doing to make our, hopefully you will find the websites. Does everybody know the websites? Hopefully. The way these are now, if you look back compared to how that was, say, last rally we did, I think it's been an absolute transformation. It's so much easier and better to find your way around. There are other things like testimonial videos highlighting the range of conservation standards, actors and experiences. The webinar series, some of you might have joined those or seen those. There's been really good participation, and all of those webinars are recorded and available for you to look at any time. And it also provides an opportunity for interaction and sharing on different topics. And then we're starting on a series of videos highlighting the different steps in conservation standards, why they're important, what users can expect from them. So, you know, we're growing and evolving with more stuff too. And then this has been another thing on members' calls, actually. We've got translations available, not in every language, but in some, where we're seeing the demand, and we see it as really crucial to engaging people. Yeah, so, and then other things, absolutely, some of our competitions, and congratulations again to the winners of the photo stories competitions, but we've had our previous case study competition, the video viewing competition, and all of these things, again, we think are just helpful in promoting and engaging people. I just did want to say a word about governance, just for those who are not aware how we actually operate. I'm standing here today, not just because I'm from WWF, but actually because I'm co-chair with Erica on the CMP board. And these are the other board members at this point in time. And also to mention that Foundations of Success have a really, really important role on this, contributing to the development of CMP, because they are CMP's legal and fiscal sponsor. They don't have to be, but we find that FOS have been brilliant in that role. So every so often we review that relationship and check that that's still working for everybody, and it has been absolutely great. So we really appreciate FOS, because CMP itself isn't a legal entity. So FOS acts as our legal and fiscal sponsor. So yes, you can have 5 to 12 people on the board. We're currently somewhere in the middle, and we've also engaged, some of you, Ryan, just put your hand up, say hello. So Ryan's engaged as extra coordination support for us, and some of you might remember Sarah Webber was supporting us on that previously, and that really helps things move along well as well. Yeah, we are doing some more work to update our strategic plan, as Caroline mentioned, so that's a really important opportunity we're taking while we're here, first time in person for quite some time to do that. And also just to mention that in terms of our other governance documents, well, they're all found on the website if you do want to know more. But importantly, just if you're interested in that governance, there are proper MOUs, Memorandums of Understanding, between CMP and FOS. and also between CMP and CCNet. And that outlines some of the things that we work on together and how that relationship actually works as what we're calling an alliance. As I say, I think it works really well. If just for interest, I represent CMP on the CCNet board, and Terry represents CCNet on the WWF, sorry, mistake, on the CMP. I didn't say that, it's not a takeover, no, on the CMP board. So that relationship works really well, and it just helps us to coordinate. But if you want to know more, do have a look at the website. And as I say, if you want to participate in any of these things, in whether you're a member of CMP or in CCNet or you're not, but you're just interested in the topic, that's absolutely great and fine. So you're very welcome to engage on our initiatives. So this last thing, hopefully we can get it to work with sound and everything. This is one of the products that came out of the CS Promotions work. It's a sort of a promotional video. Some of you might have seen it before, but I think it's just really nice. So let's see. Great, thank you. So I'm going to hand on to John, and just as Caroline comes up, I just do want to say again, thank you so much to Caroline, to FOS, being fantastic coordinators for CMP, and all the board. Thank you so much from Erica and myself. It's a voluntary contribution, and it's not an insubstantial amount of time that people put into it. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. All right. The arrow keys are right here. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to provide a little bit of an update for those of you who have seen this presentation before, but we've got people in the room who don't know that much about CCNet. We also have some newly minted coaches in the room. So a little bit of an overview, a little bit of an update. So what is CCNet? Well, here's a simple version of what CCNet is, a global community of trained professional coaches that use the conservation standards to strengthen conservation action and results around the world. Of course, a coach is a lot more than that. Yes, we do use the conservation standards, but we're also trying to bring in all sorts of other methods and tools and our experience to help conservation projects and programs. But that's the short and pithy version of what CCNet is all about. Our values include being inclusive and diverse, championing innovation and excellence, being results-oriented, being distributed responsibly and in a non-hierarchical way, and using a culture of cooperation. Here's a slide about the evolution. You saw Caroline's presentation about CMP and the conservation standards and how it evolved over time. And so here's that story there. We don't know when Conservation Standards 5.0 will be happening, but it does make Caroline shiver a little bit. So the roots of CCNet are in the Nature Conservancy. So the initial standards coaches, or CAP coaches, or even 5S coaches back in the day, were trained by a man named Greg Lowe, and he was essentially doing retail coaching. He was the only coach for a while in the Nature Conservancy. And he realized he couldn't do everything, so he trained a small cadre of coaches a while back, and that was the operating model. And they started to build what were called franchises, which we now call regional networks around the world in the operating units of the Nature Conservancy. And eventually they realized that this organization, this need to have coaches went well beyond the Nature Conservancy, and other organizations were interested in having coaches, having trained coaches around the world. And so CCNet was formed in 2009. You can see there's a little picture there of the group that planned that transition from the Nature Conservancy to a more global network involving many more organizations. That meeting was in 2008, and it happened in 2009 when CCNet was originally chartered. And we've had a number of strategic plans over the years. Here are the numbers of coaches that have been trained over time. So you see we're in the low 700s of coaches that have been trained. Now, I mentioned last night, you don't have to go through coach training to be a coach. If you learn about the conservation standards, you've been exposed to the conservation standards, you already have the skills and the experience, or someone else has mentored you, and you consider yourself a coach and you're helping project and program teams, great. That's fantastic. And coach training can really help. And the week-long intensive experience that is coach training, I think has proven to be a really good model for getting new coaches established, being on the same page, and being part of the community that is continuing to grow. So that's where we're at. Here is a graphic that shows the number of coaches that have been trained over time by regional network, by various areas. There should be a gap over there at 2021 because we didn't train any coaches in 2021. And before this year, the last coach training that we had was in South Africa in 2020, just at the very beginning of the pandemic. But already in 2022, you can see that we've trained about 50 coaches, and there's another coach training planned in Hawaii, the first coach training in the Pacific Islands that'll happen in December. So we're getting back up to speed in terms of coach trainings. And I've talked to just about every regional network just at this meeting, and I think we're going to try to have coach trainings probably in every regional network in the next year or so. So we're definitely going to ramp right back up, trying to meet the demand, which is definitely out there. This is a graphic that just shows, we talked about the certified coaches last night, and this just shows the distribution of where certified coaches are. There are not so many certified coaches. I imagine that this is going to even out over time, so probably over the next 5-10 years, I think this distribution will be a lot more even around the world, or I certainly hope it will be. Here's a graphic that shows what kinds of organizations coaches are or are not affiliated with. You can see that about half of coaches are associated with an NGO of one stripe or another, that about 18% are associated with a consulting firm, or maybe they are just their own consulting firm, and 17% with government agencies. I don't know that we have a vision for how this might or might not change. It may stay similar to this over time. I'm really not sure, but this is the current distribution of how most coaches are affiliated.
John, that's for all coaches, not just the certified ones, right?
This is for all coaches. Thanks for asking, Erica. Okay. This is the number of countries that have coaches. So we're up to 74 countries representing 252 different organizations. I think that's pretty terrific, and I hope this just continues to grow over time. Here is a look at our finances. Now, Will had mentioned that FOS is CMP's legal and financial sponsor. The Nature Conservancy is our legal and financial sponsor. And you can see that about $124,000 of cash goes through our budget every year. You can also see the rest of the cycle, which is green, is in kind. Okay? That represents 9,576 in-kind hours that have been donated to CCNet's work. So I think this is a pretty good ratio, and it just shows all of the wonderful volunteer work that all of us are doing to make CCNet what it is around the world. And I'll talk about how that work actually happens. Most of that work is happening in the regional networks. And so here's an image showing the regional networks. You can see North America, Latin America, Africa, China, Mongolia, South Asia, Australasia, Southeast Asia. You can see that there's a gap in Southern Europe around the stands, Kazakhstan, and also in the Middle East. We don't have regional representation there, but I can say that a week before last, I was in Kazakhstan training Tajiks and Kyrgyz and Kazakhs in the conservation standards. So it may not be long before we actually are able to have a regional network in Central Asia and hopefully in the Middle East as well. And that work happens through all of these wonderful people. All right, these are the regional network leads. These are leads from our communities of practice. These are leads from our partner organizations around the world. Many of these people are here in the room, and they're what really makes CCNet go, because it's really the work of coaches in the networks. The regional network leaders are the ones who organize the coach trainings. They're the ones who say, yes, we have enough people to have a coach training. Can you please help? There are rallies in the individual networks in some of them. And so I think that this is the most important group beyond the coaches themselves for CCNet. Here is how the CCNet operation is coordinated. We have Michael Looker from the board, our board chair, who couldn't be with us. We've got Christina and myself. Christina is paid half-time. I'm paid 20%. And then Marcia and Olivia and Terry, they volunteer their time to help us coordinate CCNet. The core products for CCNet, as we see it, are the coach trainings, the rallies, the listserv, the newsletter, and the website that we coordinate with CMP, and also has the Conservation Standards website on it. So we've talked a little bit about coach trainings. That's where most coaches get their start. And I'm hoping, again, that in the next year we'll ramp right back up and have coach trainings in virtually all of the regional networks in the next year. And of course, there's the rallies, which I hope, for those of you who haven't been to a rally before, I hope this met your expectations for just a wonderful event where you meet like-minded people who are struggling with the same challenges that you are and trying to figure out what the solutions are. I know that I can get discouraged after time. I don't see the results of my work. It's not very tangible. However, when I come together at a rally and I meet all of you and we talk and exchange stories, it's really inspiring, and I feel fantastic, and that lasts another couple years usually before I get tired again. So here, this is a picture from the Oregon rally. This is a picture from the rally in Mexico in Christina's backyard, and California, and some silly images from around different rallies. This is Atlanta, Georgia, and Barcelona, and the Blue Mountains in Australia. So this rally, we've got 130 people from 20 countries, and that's pretty typical of the past rallies. Maybe next rally will be further away from the pandemic and we can have an even larger rally. I don't know where that rally is going to be held. Christina has some ideas, and you may hear some buzz about where the next rally might be held, and that'll be very exciting to find out what the answer is. In terms of communication, again, there's the newsletter, and we honored Sarah for all of the work that she's done to help us in editing the newsletter. We've got the listserv, which doesn't sound like a very exciting thing, but I find it really useful. There's just the right amount of traffic on the listserv, and people's questions and the answers to those questions I usually find really interesting. There's also enough job postings in there to sprinkle some work around. So again, I find the listserv to be really helpful. And then there's the website. There was an image before that shows the three different portions of the landing page for the website. It's got the conservation standards on it, it's got CMP and CCNet, and we worked really hard to try to coordinate what went on what and show that we're all working together, CMP and CCNet, and the conservation standards and the relationship with Marathi. It's really important to try to present that in a way, even though it's a little bit confusing to most people, it's important to show that we're trying to coordinate as much as possible. We do have a theory of change. I know you can't read this, but I can highlight some of the elements of CCNet's theory of change, and we view CCNet as a strategy in and of itself for more effective conservation. The main components of our strategy is, one, to train and support coaches. So that's happening with all of the materials that we keep on the website. It's happening at coach trainings. The rallies are part of training and supporting coaches. There's strengthening coaching as a professional pathway. So that's about certification specifically. There's promoting efficient knowledge sharing. So the rallies, the newsletter, the listserv is all about knowledge sharing. And they're supporting the basic conservation standards. And that's something that we need to work with CNP very closely on to figure out what's the best way to provide basic conservation standards training. Now, it's usually going to be delivered by a conservation coach, but to the extent that CNP essentially owns and curates the conservation standards, they have a really important role too in promoting the training in the basic standards. And then just keeping the lights on. So just making sure that CCNet continues to exist, and we're so thankful for the support of the Nature Conservancy over the years. They did spin off CCNet to be this more global collaboration, but they've stood with us and supported us, and we might not be here without them. Yeah. So that's my overview. And now we're going to do an exercise. And we have been listening. During the virtual rally, we solicited your ideas about what we should be working on. CNP has similarly gone and asked its membership, what are the things that you'd like to see us focus on? And so that's what's going on around the room. And Christina is going to explain the exercise that we're going to spend the rest of this session on. So thank you.